The text message arrived at 11:37 on December 30th, just as I was reviewing quarterly projections in my apartment. Don't come to New Year's Eve tomorrow. Victoria is a corporate lawyer at Davis & Polk. She can't know about your situation. My brother Marcus had sent those words without hesitation, without apology. Within minutes, my parents called to confirm their agreement. Victoria couldn't discover that their son Dante was unemployed, struggling in embarrassment to the family name. I stared at my phone alone in my modest living space surrounded by confidential documents marked Meridian Acquisition, CEO Transition. I typed back a single word, understood. They had no idea what they had just set in motion. New Year's Day passed in complete silence. No family calls, no celebration invitations, no acknowledgement that I existed. While Marcus and Victoria toasted champagne at our parents' house in Connecticut, I sat in my downtown apartment reviewing acquisition documents that would change everything. The irony burned deeper than the rejection itself. 6 months earlier, my family believed I had been fired from Henderson Analytics, a mid-tier consulting firm where I had worked for 3 years. The truth was infinitely more complex. I had resigned voluntarily to pursue an opportunity that required absolute secrecy. Harold Brennan, a venture capitalist who had noticed my work restructuring failing companies, approached me with a proposition that seemed impossible at first glance. There's a tech company called Meridian Industries, Harold had explained during our first meeting at a quiet coffee shop in Brooklyn. They're hemorrhaging money, but they have breakthrough technology in renewable energy storage. The current CEO is destroying everything. I need someone young, hungry, and brilliant to take over completely. The deal required me to live modestly, maintain absolute discretion, and let everyone believe I was unemployed while I secretly orchestrated the most significant corporate turnaround of my career. Harold provided funding through shell companies and offshore accounts. My family saw a failure. Harold saw the future. For 6 months, I had endured pitying looks from relatives, concerned phone calls from friends, and increasingly condescending advice from Marcus about finding realistic employment. Every family dinner became an exercise in humiliation as they discussed my situation with barely concealed disappointment. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding Meridian from the ground up. The company's revolutionary battery technology could store renewable energy for weeks without degradation, a breakthrough that would transform entire industries. Previous management had focused on quick profits instead of long-term development. I shifted everything toward research and sustainable growth. My assistant Sarah Walsh coordinated meetings from a discreet office space in Manhattan, while I worked mostly from home analyzing financial projections and meeting with engineers. The board of directors knew me only through encrypted communications and video calls. Even Harold kept our relationship completely confidential. The transformation had been remarkable. Meridian's valuation increased from $12 million to over $100 million in just 5 months. Major corporations were lining up for partnerships. The renewable energy breakthrough was ready for market launch. But the most satisfying development was completely unexpected. Meridian's board had decided to hire external legal representation for our upcoming merger discussions. They chose Davis & Polk, one of the most prestigious law firms in New York City. The same firm where Victoria worked. On January 1st, as I reviewed contracts alone in my apartment, Harold called with confirmation. The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Davis & Polk will be representing Meridian in the $50 million acquisition deal. Victoria Hamilton will be the lead attorney. Victoria had no idea she would be walking into a boardroom where the CEO she had never met would be the unemployed loser her fiancé had banned from family celebrations. The poetic justice was almost overwhelming. I spent New Year's evening preparing for the most important business meeting of my life, knowing it would simultaneously become the moment my family's perception of reality would shatter completely. Marcus had chosen Victoria over family loyalty. Tomorrow, Victoria would discover exactly who she had dismissed so casually. The document spread across my dining table told the story my family refused to see. Financial projections showed Meridian becoming a billion-dollar company within 2 years. Partnership agreements with Fortune 500 corporations waited for signatures. Patent applications for revolutionary technology sat ready for approval. Marcus had sent his text message believing he was protecting his relationship from embarrassment. Instead, he had guaranteed that his fiancée would face the most humiliating professional moment of her career, while I would emerge as everything they had never imagined possible. Davis and Polk occupied 3 floors of a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Manhattan. The 42nd floor conference room featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, polished mahogany furniture, and an atmosphere of refined corporate power. I arrived at 9:45 wearing a charcoal gray suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Sarah Walsh had coordinated every detail perfectly. The conference table was set with leather portfolios containing acquisition documents. Crystal water glasses reflected morning sunlight. Senior partners would be attending this meeting personally because Meridian represented their largest new client in 18 months. Robert Whitman, the senior partner handling major acquisitions, greeted me warmly in the reception area. "Mr. Rossetti, we're honored to represent Meridian Industries. This merger will be significant for everyone involved." "The honor is entirely ours," I replied, shaking his hand with genuine confidence. "Your firm's reputation for complex transactions made you our obvious choice." We entered the conference room where junior associates were making final preparations. Jessica Turner, a sharp young lawyer, reviewed documents methodically. David Kelly, Meridian's CFO, who had flown in from Chicago, tested presentation equipment. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. At exactly 10 o'clock, Victoria entered the room carrying a briefcase and legal portfolio. She wore a navy blue business suit and walked with the confident stride of someone accustomed to commanding respect in corporate environments. Her blonde hair was pulled back professionally, and her expression conveyed serious focus on the important meeting ahead. She glanced around the room, nodding politely to colleagues and clients, then stopped completely when her eyes reached the head of the table where I sat calmly reviewing final contract terms. The recognition process was fascinating to observe. First confusion, then disbelief, then dawning horror as reality crashed through her professional composure. "What are you doing here?" Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible across the mahogany expanse. "I'm Dante Rossetti, Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Industries." I responded evenly, maintaining complete professional demeanor. "I believe we haven't been formally introduced, though I understand you're engaged to my brother Marcus." The portfolio slipped from Victoria's hands, scattering legal documents across the polished floor. Her face flushed deep red as she realized the magnitude of the situation. Every person in the room was staring, witnessing her complete loss of professional control. "This can't be happening," she said loudly, her voice rising to a near shout. "This is some kind of joke. You're unemployed. You've been unemployed for months. Marcus told me everything about your situation." Robert Whitman stepped forward with obvious concern. "Victoria, please maintain your composure. This is our most important client meeting this quarter." But Victoria was beyond professional restraint. The shock had shattered her carefully constructed image of reality. She began backing toward the door, shaking her head repeatedly, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. "You planned this," she accused, pointing directly at me. "You deliberately chose our firm because you knew I worked here. This is some kind of revenge scheme because Marcus didn't invite you to New Year's Eve." The silence in the room was deafening. Senior partners, junior associates, and corporate executives watched this deeply personal drama unfold during what should have been a routine business meeting. Victoria's career was imploding in real time, and everyone present could see it happening. "Miss Hamilton," I said quietly, using her professional name with deliberate formality. "I chose Davis and Polk because of your firm's excellent reputation in corporate law. Your personal relationship with my family didn't influence this business decision in any way." Jessica Turner had begun collecting the scattered documents from the floor. David Kelly cleared his throat uncomfortably. Robert Whitman looked absolutely mortified by his associates' behavior in front of their biggest client. Victoria continued backing toward the door, her professional mask completely shattered. I need to leave. I can't be here. This isn't real. She fled the conference room, leaving behind her briefcase portfolio and the wreckage of her professional reputation. The heavy door closed with a soft click, leaving the remaining attendees in stunned silence. Robert Whitman turned to me with an expression of deep embarrassment and concern. Mr. Rossetti, I sincerely apologize for that unprecedented breach of professionalism. Miss Hamilton will face serious disciplinary action for her conduct during this meeting. Please, don't take any action on my account, I replied calmly. Personal relationships can create unexpected complications. Perhaps we could continue with the merger discussions using different legal representation from your firm. The meeting proceeded with Jessica Turner taking over Victoria's responsibilities. The contracts were signed, partnership agreements finalized, and acquisition terms approved. But everyone in the room understood they had witnessed something far more significant than a business transaction. They had seen the moment when family betrayal met professional consequence, when assumptions about success and failure collided with actual reality. As I left Davis and Polk that morning carrying signed documents worth $50 million, I felt no satisfaction in Victoria's humiliation. Instead, I felt the weight of family relationships torn apart by pride assumptions and the unwillingness to see beyond surface appearances. The phone call started before I reached my apartment. Marcus had heard from Victoria within minutes of her leaving the law firm, and his rage was volcanic. My parents called next, demanding explanations for what they couldn't understand. By 6 that evening, I was sitting in my childhood living room in Connecticut, facing the most explosive family confrontation of my adult life. You deliberately humiliated her. Marcus paced behind the sofa like a caged animal. You knew she worked at that law firm. You chose them specifically to embarrass Victoria in front of her colleagues. Our parents sat rigidly on opposite sides of the coffee table. Dad gripped his reading glasses so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Mom twisted her wedding ring continuously, a nervous habit from childhood that emerged during family crises. Explain this to us, Dante, Mom said quietly. Victoria called here crying, saying you're the CEO of some major company, but you've been unemployed for 6 months. We've been worried sick about your finances. I've never been unemployed, I replied calmly. I left Henderson Analytics to acquire and restructure Meridian Industries. The work required complete confidentiality, so I couldn't discuss details with anyone. Dad leaned forward, his expression shifting from confusion to anger. You let us believe you were struggling financially while you were secretly running a company. Do you understand how worried we've been? How many nights your mother couldn't sleep, wondering if you had enough money for rent? The accusation stung because it was partially accurate. I had allowed them to worry unnecessarily rather than break confidentiality agreements that could have destroyed the acquisition. The choice had seemed reasonable 6 months ago. Now, facing the pain in my mother's eyes, it felt cruel. The acquisition required absolute secrecy, I explained. If news leaked that Meridian was changing leadership, the stock price would have collapsed before we could complete the restructuring. Hundreds of jobs depended on maintaining confidentiality. Marcus stopped pacing and spun to face me directly. That's convenient justification for making your family look like fools. Do you know what people said when Victoria ran out of that boardroom screaming her career might be completely destroyed because of your little surprise revelation? Victoria's career problems stem from her unprofessional behavior, not from my business success, I replied. Professional lawyers don't scream at clients during merger meetings regardless of personal relationships. She was shocked, Marcus shot back. Anyone would be shocked finding their fiancé's unemployed brother sitting at the head of a corporate boardroom claiming to be a CEO. The conversation was interrupted by the distinctive chime of my phone receiving priority notifications. Harold Brennan was calling, and the display showed 3 missed calls from business journalists. Something significant was happening. Excuse me, I need to take this call, I said, answering Harold's call while my family watched with obvious irritation. Dante, Are you seeing the news coverage? Harold's voice carried excitement and concern in equal measure. Business Insider just published a story about the Meridian acquisition. They're calling it the most impressive corporate turnaround by an executive under 30 in the renewable energy sector. I glanced at my phone while Harold continued talking. Notifications showed incoming calls from CNN Business Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. The story was spreading across financial media faster than I had anticipated. The article mentions the innovative battery technology and projected market impact, Harold continued. They're estimating Meridian's valuation could reach $5 billion within 3 years if the renewable energy partnerships develop as projected. My family was staring at me with expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. The phone conversation was providing context they hadn't possessed moments earlier. "Thank you for the update," I told Harold. "I'll review the coverage and get back to you this evening." After ending the call, I looked at 3 family members whose worldview had been fundamentally challenged in the span of a single day. That was Harold Brennan, my primary investor, I explained. Business media is reporting on Meridian's acquisition and growth projections. Apparently, the renewable energy breakthrough is attracting significant attention from major corporations and environmental organizations. Dad was the first to speak. "How much is this company worth?" Dante, "Current valuation is approximately $100 million, I answered honestly. Projected growth could increase that significantly within 2 to 3 years. The silence stretched for nearly a full minute. Mom covered her face with both hands. Dad stared at the ceiling. Marcus sat down heavily, his anger replaced by something resembling shock. "We told you not to come to New Year's Eve because we were embarrassed," Mom said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "We were embarrassed by our son who's worth $100 million. Marcus rubbed his forehead repeatedly, a gesture I remembered from childhood when he was processing information that challenged his assumptions. "Victoria is going to be fired," he said quietly. "Her firm won't tolerate that kind of behavior in front of major clients. She worked 6 years to become a senior associate, and now it's probably all destroyed. Maybe she should have considered professional consequences before screaming at strangers during business meetings," I replied. "Corporate lawyers don't typically survive public breakdowns regardless of personal circumstances." The phone rang again. This time it was a producer from CNBC requesting an interview about renewable energy innovation and young entrepreneurs transforming traditional industries. As I scheduled the interview for the following morning, I realized my family was witnessing the collapse of every assumption they had made about success, failure, and the relative value of their children's achievements. Victoria's professional world crumbled systematically over the next 3 days. The story of her boardroom breakdown spread through legal circles with the devastating speed that only true embarrassment could achieve. By Wednesday morning, she was sitting in Patricia Rodriguez's office facing career consequences that seemed almost impossibly severe. Patricia had mentored Victoria since her first day at Davis & Polk. As the firm's managing partner for corporate law, she wielded significant influence over associate advancement and termination decisions. Her office overlooked Madison Avenue through windows that normally provided a calming view during difficult conversations. Today, nothing could ease the tension filling the mahogany-paneled space. "I've reviewed the incident reports from Monday's meeting," Patricia said, reading from a manila folder thick with documentation. "4 senior partners, 2 junior associates, and 3 client representatives witnessed your outburst during the Meridian Industries merger conference." Victoria sat rigidly in the leather chair wearing a black suit that seemed appropriate for mourning her career. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept since Monday. Her usually perfect appearance showed stress cracks that makeup couldn't conceal. "Robert Whitman described your behavior as the most unprofessional conduct he's observed in 23 years of practice," Patricia continued. "You screamed at our largest new client, abandoned confidential documents on the floor, and fled a $50 million merger meeting without explanation." "I was shocked," Victoria said weakly. "I had no idea Dante was the CEO. The situation caught me completely off guard." Patricia closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. Your personal relationships don't justify professional misconduct. Corporate lawyers must maintain composure regardless of surprising circumstances. Clients trust us to handle sensitive negotiations with complete professionalism. The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Patricia's assistant entered with an urgent message that made Victoria's situation exponentially worse. "Excuse me, but you need to see this immediately," the assistant said, handing Patricia a tablet displaying the morning's business news. "There's coverage of Monday's incident, and it specifically mentions our firm." Victoria watched Patricia's expression darken as she read the article. Business Insider had published a detailed story about Dante's corporate success, including a paragraph about the dramatic boardroom confrontation with a Davis and Polk attorney who fled the meeting after discovering the client's identity. "They don't name you specifically," Patricia said, "but anyone in legal circles will identify you within hours. This kind of publicity damages our firm's reputation for handling sensitive corporate transactions." Victoria felt her remaining hope dissolving. The story was spreading beyond legal circles into general business media. Her professional breakdown was becoming industry gossip that would follow her for years. "I want to apologize to Mr. Rossetti," Victoria said desperately. "If I explain the situation and demonstrate professional accountability, maybe the damage can be contained." Patricia shook her head slowly. "The partners met this morning to discuss your status. You're being removed from all major client accounts immediately. Your access to confidential files is suspended pending investigation. And frankly, Victoria, I don't see how you survive this." The words hit like physical blows. 6 years of building her career, countless hours of preparation for partnership track, all destroyed by one moment of uncontrolled shock. Meanwhile, Marcus was dealing with his own crisis of understanding. He had driven to Victoria's apartment in Brooklyn Heights to offer support, but found her researching Dante's company with obsessive intensity. "Look at this," Victoria said, pointing to her laptop screen displaying Meridian Industries' corporate website. "He's been planning this for months. The company was founded 8 months ago, right after he left Henderson Analytics. He deliberately chose Davis and Polk, knowing I worked there." Marcus studied the timeline Victoria had constructed. Press releases, corporate filings, and business registrations painted a picture of methodical planning and strategic execution that seemed impossible to reconcile with the unemployed brother he had pitied for 6 months. "Maybe he didn't target you specifically," Marcus suggested. "Davis and Polk is one of the most prestigious corporate law firms in the city. Any major company might choose them for legal representation." "Don't be naive," Victoria snapped. "He orchestrated this entire situation to humiliate me professionally as revenge for being excluded from New Year's Eve. He's vindictive and calculating in ways we never imagined." But even as Victoria spoke, she realized the fundamental flaw in her reasoning. If Dante had planned deliberate revenge, why hadn't he revealed the truth about his success earlier? Why endure months of family pity and social embarrassment when he could have destroyed their assumptions at any time? The phone rang, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. Patricia Rodriguez was calling with final news about Victoria's employment status. "The partners have reached a unanimous decision," Patricia said without preamble. "Your employment with Davis and Polk will be terminated effective Friday afternoon. We'll provide standard references for your work prior to Monday's incident, but we cannot risk additional unprofessional behavior affecting client relationships." Victoria hung up the phone and stared at Marcus with the hollow expression of someone whose carefully planned life had collapsed in 72 hours. "I'm fired," she said simply. 6 years of work destroyed because I couldn't control my shock at seeing your brother in a boardroom." Marcus wrapped his arms around her, feeling helpless against consequences that seemed wildly disproportionate to the circumstances. But privately, he was beginning to understand that Victoria's career problems represented something much larger than a single moment of unprofessional behavior. His brother had spent 6 months allowing family members to treat him with condescension and pity, rather than reveal success that would have immediately commanded respect. The patience required for such restraint suggested character depth, that Marcus was only beginning to recognize. The story exploded across social media on Thursday morning when Business Insider published a follow-up article titled, "From Family Outcast to CEO, the Renewable Energy Wunderkind They Didn't See Coming." Within hours, the narrative of family rejection, followed by dramatic vindication, captured public imagination in ways that transcended typical business news. I was reviewing partnership proposals in my apartment when Sarah Walsh called with an update that changed everything about my carefully maintained privacy. "The story is trending on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook simultaneously," Sarah reported. Business journalists are calling it the most compelling underdog success story of the year. 3 major news networks want interviews and someone leaked details about your family dynamics. The leak concerned me immediately. I had never discussed family relationships with business associates or journalists. The specific details suggested the information came from someone with intimate knowledge of recent events. "What kind of details?" I asked, though I suspected the answer would be disturbing. "Text messages from New Year's Eve," Sarah said grimly. "Someone shared screenshots of your brother telling you not to attend family celebrations because your unemployed status would embarrass his fiancée. The public is responding very emotionally to the family betrayal angle." I felt sick. Private family communications had become public entertainment, transforming a personal situation into viral content that millions of strangers could judge and share. The exposure felt more violating than any business scrutiny. The phone rang constantly throughout the morning. CNN Business wanted an interview about young entrepreneurs in renewable energy. Good Morning America requested a segment on family dynamics and personal success. The Wall Street Journal proposed a feature story about innovative leadership in emerging technologies. But the social media response was what truly shocked me. Thousands of people were sharing their own stories of family members who failed to recognize their potential. The hashtag #FamilyBetrayal was trending nationally, with people posting about relatives who dismissed their dreams, excluded them from celebrations, or treated them as failures before discovering their success. By Thursday afternoon, Marcus was calling in a panic. "Have you seen what people are saying online about Victoria and me? They're calling us shallow, materialistic, and cruel." Someone posted our engagement photos with captions about karma and justice. I hadn't sought public attention or social media vindication. The viral response felt overwhelming and slightly frightening in its intensity. Strangers were defending me with passionate anger while attacking my family members with vicious creativity. "I never intended for this to become public entertainment," I told Marcus. "Business journalists reported on Meridian's success, but I didn't share details about family relationships." "Well, someone did," Marcus replied bitterly. "Victoria is getting death threats from people who think she represents everything wrong with corporate culture. My boss heard about the story and asked if I was the brother who banned the successful sibling from family events." The situation became more complex when Harold Brennan called with news about the business implications of media attention. "Venture capital firms are calling with acquisition offers that seemed impossible last week," Harold explained. "The public narrative about innovative leadership and overcoming adversity has created enormous interest in Meridian Industries. 3 different firms want to invest at valuations exceeding $200 million. The irony was overwhelming. Family rejection that had caused genuine emotional pain was now generating public sympathy that translated directly into business opportunities worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But the media attention also revealed disturbing information about deliberate sabotage attempts I hadn't previously discovered. Amanda Foster, the Business Insider journalist who broke the original story, called Thursday evening with questions about my family's recent activities. "I'm working on a follow-up story about how families handle sudden success," Amanda explained. "During my research, I discovered that someone has been contacting potential investors and business partners to share negative information about your character and business practices." My blood ran cold. "What kind of negative information?" "Claims that you're dishonest in business dealings, that Meridian Industries is built on stolen technology, and that your success story is fabricated for media attention," Amanda continued. "The person making these calls identified himself as your brother and said he was protecting investors from making costly mistakes." I sat in stunned silence, processing the implications of Marcus's betrayal. While I had been building a revolutionary company and enduring family pity, he had been actively trying to destroy my business relationships through deliberate sabotage. "Do you have recordings or documentation of these calls?" I asked. "Three different venture capital firms kept records because the accusations seemed suspiciously personal rather than professionally motivated," Amanda said. "They're willing to provide evidence if you're planning legal action against whoever is spreading false information." The scope of family betrayal suddenly seemed much deeper than social exclusion or embarrassing assumptions. Marcus had been systematically attempting to destroy my business reputation while maintaining the pretense of brotherly concern. When I called Gregory Hamilton, my corporate attorney, to discuss legal options, he had already heard about the situation from multiple sources. "The investment community is small," Gregory explained. "When someone starts making serious accusations about fraud or stolen technology, that information spreads quickly among venture capital firms and corporate partners. Your brother's calls could have destroyed business relationships worth hundreds of millions of dollars." The realization hit me like a physical blow. Marcus hadn't simply excluded me from family celebrations due to embarrassment. He had been actively working to ensure my failure, sabotaging business relationships while pretending to care about my unemployment situation. The viral social media story suddenly seemed less about family misunderstanding and more about deliberate cruelty designed to maintain Marcus's position as the successful brother who deserved respect and admiration. I called Marcus on Friday morning and requested a meeting at our parents' house. The conversation needed witnesses and the weight of family history to address betrayals that went far beyond simple misunderstanding. He arrived at 2 in the afternoon, clearly expecting another discussion about Victoria's career problems and media attention. Our parents sat nervously in the living room, sensing the gravity of whatever was about to unfold. Dad occupied his usual recliner while Mom positioned herself on the sofa where she could see both her sons clearly. The afternoon sunlight streaming through bay windows created an almost theatrical setting for what would become the most devastating family confrontation of our lives. "I have something to show everyone," I said, opening my laptop and connecting it to the television. "These are recordings provided by 3 different venture capital firms documenting attempts to sabotage Meridian Industries through false accusations and character assassination." Marcus's face went completely white. He understood immediately what evidence I possessed and realized the magnitude of his exposure. The first recording began playing through the television speakers. Marcus's voice was clearly identifiable as he spoke to Thomas Ashford from Pinnacle Capital Partners. "I'm calling about Dante Rossetti and Meridian Industries," Marcus said on the recording. "I'm his brother, and I feel obligated to warn you about serious concerns regarding his business practices and character. The renewable energy technology he's claiming to have developed was actually stolen from his previous employer. The whole success story is fabricated to attract investors." Mom gasped audibly. Dad leaned forward with an expression of disbelief and growing anger. The recording continued with Marcus providing detailed accusations about financial irregularities, dishonest business dealings, and warnings that investors would lose their money if they trusted Meridian Industries. "That's not the worst part," I said, pausing the first recording and starting the second. "He made similar calls to at least 6 different firms over the past 2 months. The second recording featured Marcus speaking to Jennifer Park at Catalyst Ventures, repeating accusations about stolen technology, while adding claims that I had a gambling addiction and used investor money for personal expenses." Marcus tried to interrupt. "Dante, let me explain the context of these calls." "There is no context that justifies systematic lies designed to destroy your brother's business relationships," Dad said with controlled fury. "You deliberately tried to sabotage his success while pretending to be concerned about his unemployment." The third recording was the most damaging. Marcus had called Summit Growth Partners just 5 days earlier after the media stories about Meridian's success began appearing and claimed that my achievements were exaggerated for publicity purposes. "My brother has always been jealous of successful people," Marcus said on the recording. "He's fabricating this CEO story to get attention and sympathy. The company is probably worth much less than reported, and investors should be extremely cautious." When the recordings finished, the living room fell into complete silence. The weight of Marcus's betrayal was so comprehensive that no one seemed capable of immediate response. "How could you do this to your own brother?" Mom asked finally, her voice breaking with emotion. "How could you try to destroy his business while we were all worried about his finances?" Marcus stood up abruptly and began pacing, his composure completely shattered. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under. Victoria has these expectations about success and status. Her family has money connections, prestigious careers. I couldn't let them discover that my unemployed brother was actually more successful than I am. So you decided to ensure his failure rather than celebrate his success," Dad said coldly. "You chose to actively harm your family member to protect your own ego." The confrontation was interrupted by the sound of a car door slamming in the driveway. Through the front window, we could see Victoria walking toward the house, carrying a manila envelope and wearing the determined expression of someone who had made a difficult decision. She entered without knocking, which would have been normal behavior a week earlier, but now felt intrusive given the circumstances. "I heard the recordings," Victoria said immediately, looking directly at Marcus. "Thomas Ashford called me this morning to ask if I knew about your attempts to sabotage Dante's business. He wanted to know if the family dynamics were as dysfunctional as your calls suggested." Marcus stared at Victoria with growing panic. "You talked to the investors." "I talked to 3 different firms because I wanted to understand the extent of what you had done," Victoria continued. "I also brought something that Dante deserves to see." She handed me the manila envelope with obvious reluctance. Inside were printed copies of text message conversations between Victoria and Marcus dating back several weeks. The first message thread showed Victoria complaining about attending family events where Dante's unemployment would be discussed. Marcus had responded by suggesting they could use Dante's failure as an example of what happens to people who lack ambition and realistic career goals. The second thread was much worse. Victoria had written, "Maybe we should warn people that your brother is the type of person who makes poor decisions and could embarrass successful people by association." Marcus had replied, "I'm already handling that situation. I've been making sure the right people understand his character problems before he can damage our reputations." "You were both plotting to ensure my professional isolation," I said, looking at text messages that revealed a level of calculated cruelty I hadn't imagined possible from family members. Victoria sat down heavily, avoiding eye contact with everyone in the room. "I brought these because Marcus was planning to blame everything on shock and misunderstanding. I wanted you to know that we had discussed excluding you and damaging your reputation long before the boardroom incident." The revelation was devastating in its completeness. This wasn't about embarrassment over unemployment or concern about social appearances. Marcus and Victoria had actively conspired to isolate me professionally and socially while maintaining the pretense of family concern. "Why are you showing us this?" Mom asked Victoria with obvious confusion. "Because I lost my job, my reputation, and probably my career because of what happened Monday," Victoria replied. "But I've spent 4 days thinking about the person I became when I agreed to participate in systematically destroying someone's life out of jealousy and insecurity." She looked directly at me for the first time since entering the house. "I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for anything. But you deserve to know the truth about how premeditated this betrayal actually was." Marcus was staring at Victoria with absolute shock. "You're ending our engagement." "I'm ending a relationship with someone who taught me that cruelty could be justified by social ambition," Victoria said quietly. "The person I became while dating you is someone I don't recognize or respect." She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "For whatever it's worth, congratulations on building something extraordinary while the people who should have supported you were actively trying to tear you down." After Victoria left, the living room fell into another extended silence. The scope of betrayal was so comprehensive that normal family conflict resolution seemed impossible. Marcus finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "I was terrified that your success would make me look like a failure by comparison. Victoria's family has all these expectations about achievement and status. I thought if I could prevent your business from succeeding, I could maintain my position as the brother who had his life together. So you decided to destroy my life to protect your ego, I said. You spent months sabotaging business relationships that represented years of work and innovation. I never thought it would actually hurt you, Marcus said weakly. I thought you were just playing with some small startup that would fail anyway. Dad stood up slowly, his face showing disgust that seemed to age him years in moments. You tried to destroy your brother's livelihood out of jealousy and ego. That's not a mistake, Marcus. That's a deliberate choice to cause harm to your own family. The confrontation had revealed betrayals so systematic and calculated that rebuilding family relationships seemed almost impossible. But as I looked at my parents' faces, I realized that anger and revenge would only create more damage to people I still loved, despite their failures. 6 months later, I stood in the same living room where the final confrontation had shattered our family's illusions about loyalty and support. But everything had changed in ways that none of us could have predicted that devastating Friday afternoon. The space felt warmer somehow, filled with hesitant hope rather than bitter recrimination. Marcus arrived first, looking healthier than he had in years. Therapy with Dr. Michael Stevens had helped him understand the insecurity and competitive resentment that had driven him to sabotage his own brother's success. The work wasn't easy, but Marcus was committed to rebuilding both his character and our relationship through genuine accountability. I brought something for you, Marcus said, handing me a manila envelope similar to the one Victoria had delivered months earlier. These are letters of recommendation I sent to the venture capital firms I contacted with false information. I explained the situation completely and recommended they invest in Meridian Industries based on the actual merits of your innovation. The gesture meant more than any apology could have accomplished. Marcus had systematically contacted every person he had tried to sabotage, explaining his motivations and recommending they ignore his previous accusations. Several firms had ultimately invested in Meridian specifically because of Marcus's candid acknowledgement of his mistakes. Mom entered from the kitchen carrying a tray of coffee and pastries, her face showing a peace that had been absent during months of family crisis. The revelation about Marcus's sabotage attempts had initially devastated her, but therapy sessions with Dr. Stevens had helped the entire family understand how competitive dynamics and unspoken expectations had created an environment where cruelty seemed justified. Victoria called this morning. Mom said, setting down the tray and settling into her usual spot on the sofa. She wanted to update us about her new practice and to ask if she could send a graduation announcement when she finishes law school. Victoria had indeed lost her job at Davis & Polk, but the experience had prompted her to completely reevaluate her career priorities and personal values. She had enrolled in a part-time law program focused on environmental advocacy, supporting renewable energy development instead of corporate acquisition. Her new practice specialized in helping small technology companies navigate legal challenges while maintaining ethical standards. She's doing important work, I said honestly. Environmental law is going to become increasingly critical as renewable energy expands. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Claire Bennett, who had become an essential part of my life over the past 4 months. Claire worked as a project coordinator for environmental nonprofits, and we had met during a conference about sustainable technology development. She understood my work not from a financial perspective, but from a commitment to creating positive change. "Sorry I'm late," Claire said, embracing me warmly before greeting my family with the genuine affection that had developed since our relationship became serious. The Sierra Club meeting ran longer than expected, but they approved funding for the Renewable Energy Education Program. Claire's presence had helped me understand that success meant more than vindication against family betrayal. Building meaningful relationships and contributing to environmental progress provided satisfaction that no amount of wealth or professional recognition could match. Dad joined us from his study where he had been reviewing financial documents related to the family foundation we were establishing together. Meridian Industries' success had created opportunities for philanthropy focused on environmental education and renewable energy access for underserved communities. "The foundation paperwork is nearly complete," Dad announced with obvious pride. We'll be able to provide scholarships for engineering students interested in sustainable technology development. The foundation represented a form of family healing that seemed impossible 6 months earlier. Instead of allowing Marcus's betrayal to destroy our relationships permanently, we had chosen forgiveness and collaborative efforts to create positive impact from the painful lessons we had learned. Harold Brennan arrived precisely at 4 o'clock, bringing final documents for the acquisition that would make Meridian Industries a subsidiary of Pacific Renewable Systems, a company focused on global environmental technology distribution. The sale price had reached $350 million, exceeding even Harold's most optimistic projections. This partnership will allow Meridian's battery technology to reach international markets within 18 months, Harold explained as we reviewed the final terms. Pacific Renewable has distribution networks in 43 countries and existing relationships with major utilities companies. The financial success felt satisfying, but not in ways I had anticipated during those lonely months when family members treated me with condescension and pity. Money and professional recognition provided security and opportunities, but they couldn't create the relationships and sense of purpose that actually generated happiness. Marcus had learned similar lessons through his own painful journey. Losing Victoria, facing family disappointment, and confronting his capacity for deliberate cruelty had forced him to examine motivations and values he had never questioned previously. "I've been thinking about career changes," Marcus said during a quiet moment while others reviewed foundation documents. "Corporate consulting feels meaningless after everything that's happened. I want to work on projects that actually matter." "What kind of projects?" I asked, genuinely interested in his evolving perspective. "Environmental education may be working with Dr. Stevens to help other families address competitive dynamics that create harmful behavior," Marcus replied. "I understand now that my jealousy and insecurity nearly destroyed someone I love. Maybe that experience could help other people recognize similar patterns before they cause irreversible damage." The idea had merit. Marcus's journey from sabotage to accountability could indeed help families navigate success dynamics without resorting to destructive competition and deliberate harm. As the afternoon progressed, our conversation naturally turned to future plans and collaborative possibilities. The Family Foundation would support environmental education. Marcus would pursue meaningful work helping families address competitive dynamics. Claire and I would continue developing sustainable technology while building a relationship based on shared values rather than social status. Even Victoria's story was developing in positive directions. Her new law practice was growing steadily, and she had begun dating someone who appreciated her commitment to environmental advocacy rather than her corporate earning potential. "There's something I want to say to everyone," I said as we prepared to end the family gathering. 6 months ago, Marcus's betrayal felt like the worst thing that could happen to our family. But it forced all of us to examine our values and priorities in ways we probably never would have chosen voluntarily. I looked around the room at people who had grown substantially through confronting their capacity for both cruelty and forgiveness. I learned that success without meaningful relationships feels empty. Marcus learned that jealousy and competition can destroy the people we love most. Our parents learned that favoritism and assumptions can create environments where betrayal seems reasonable. Mom wiped away tears that seemed to represent both sadness for past mistakes and hope for continued growth. We nearly lost each other completely because we couldn't see beyond surface appearances and social expectations. Dad nodded slowly. "The most successful thing this family ever accomplished was choosing forgiveness and growth over revenge and permanent resentment." As we prepared to leave that evening, Claire and I walked hand in hand to our car parked in the driveway where this journey had begun, with a devastating text message about family embarrassment. The contrast between that lonely New Year's Eve and this gathering filled with genuine connection felt almost miraculous. "Do you think your family has really changed permanently?" Claire asked as we drove back toward the city. "I think we've learned that relationships require constant attention and intentional choices," I replied. "The betrayal taught us how easily love can turn to jealousy and cruelty if we don't actively choose better alternatives." Meridian Industries had indeed transformed the renewable energy storage industry. Our battery technology was being installed in solar farms across the American Southwest, wind facilities in the Midwest, and residential systems in suburban communities nationwide. The environmental impact felt substantial and lasting. But the personal transformation had been equally significant. A family that had nearly destroyed itself through jealousy and competition had chosen growth, forgiveness, and collaborative purpose. Marcus was building a meaningful career helping other families navigate similar challenges. Victoria was using her legal skills to support environmental progress. Our parents were funding educational opportunities for young people interested in sustainable technology. The story that began with family betrayal and professional humiliation had evolved into something much more complex and ultimately more satisfying than simple revenge could ever have provided. Sometimes the greatest victory comes not from proving others wrong, but from choosing forgiveness and growth, even when revenge would feel justified. Family relationships can survive devastating betrayals if people are willing to examine their mistakes honestly and commit to becoming better versions of themselves. The renewable energy revolution continues expanding across America and around the world, creating opportunities for environmental progress that seemed impossible just a few years ago. But the real transformation happens in individual hearts and homes, where people choose connection over competition and love over ego. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? And if so, how did you choose to respond? Did you seek revenge, or did you find ways to forgive and rebuild the relationship? I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might benefit from hearing about the power of forgiveness and personal growth. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes our greatest challenges become our most meaningful opportunities for transformation and genuine connection.